Hello everyone, and welcome to Big Questions. My name's Joseph, and Big Questions is a space to explore topics about life, its meaning, and also what Christianity has to say about them. Today, I'm very pleased to say we have Mike Hood here to be looking at the questions, are Maybells as good as it gets? Mike is a Cambridge graduate who studied English at Selwyn. And so, without further ado, I'll pass it on to him.
As the guy who was here last week said, always nice when you get applause at the start. Just spread your bets in case you don't get any at the end. Brilliant. So today we are thinking about this big question. Maybells, are they as good? Hang on. Maybells, are they as good as it gets? Happily, that's not what we're going to spend most of the lunchtime talking about. We're thinking about Maybells in the non-strictly come dancing sense, and whether they are as good as it gets. And hopefully we're going to do a little bit more than that as well. Hopefully we're going to see that actually how we think about Maybells shows us a little bit about ourselves and about how we feel about life. And that has some surprisingly deep implications. But it's worth saying before we start that how you feel about Maybells may well be affected by your own personal experience of them. For example, one of my best mates was punting. He was working as a punter at Darwin Mayball last year. And he was punting one girl around, and he brought her back and kind of pulled up to the jetty for her to get out. And she reached out and sort of grabbed onto the railing. But what he didn't realize was that she couldn't swim, and she was scared of water. And she grabbed onto the railing, but she was too scared to step off the boat. And the problem with this was that now she was leaning slightly outwards, so her weight was now actually pushing the punt away from the jetty. And she was now much more scared to take the step because it was getting bigger and bigger. He told her to let go of the railing, but she wouldn't because she was so scared. And so he just watched as gradually her feet pushed the thing further and further backwards until she was basically horizontal between the railing and the punt, and eventually her feet came off. She just fell straight into the cam. All I'm saying is, if we asked her our question today, I'm pretty sure she would give a firm no. But I'm sure that lots of you today, actually looking around, a lot of you are freshers, and so you actually have all of this yet to discover. You don't have experiences of this to bring to the table. And maybe you're also yet to discover the kind of ongoing debate in all the student newspapers about Maybells. Basically, every year there's several articles in TCS or Varsity or the Tab or whatever about whether Maybells are a good thing or not. And as I was thinking about this talk, I went back and read through loads of them, and they are really fascinating. And it seems to me that there are basically three attitudes that people can have to it, although you hardly ever see the third one. The first one is the overriding theme of all of the kind of anti-Maybell articles, and it goes a bit like this. Life is stingy, by which I mean, the universe is a tough, dark place, So don't have extravagant fun. You don't deserve it. It's not really appropriate. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there are loads of good reasons behind this argument, absolutely tons. I read a really interesting article saying that Maybells are inherently anti-sustainability because there's just always going to be so much waste. Or there are loads that argue that it's fundamentally kind of exclusive because it's so expensive, and then there are students that can't afford it, and yet they feel like they kind of have to or ought to because all their friends are going. But the thing is, however good the arguments are, this always comes across a bit like I've made it come across in that summary, a bit kind of bitter, a bit negative. There's one of the pro-Maybell articles just emotionally undercuts all of it with a little bit of humour. He just says, "But to the Scrooges among us, we know we're an embarrassment and we shouldn't dare have so much fun. We should be tucked up in our Hogwarts dormitories thanking our lucky A-stars." And there is something in us that just feels like, you know what, fun is good. Joy is good. Creativity is good. And we surely can't live on the basis that every bit of joy is an injustice as long as there are other people out there not having so much fun. No, that ends up just feeling tinny and nasty somehow. But here's the thing. The main opposition argument to that has something very significant in common with it. It goes something like this. Life is stingy. Similarly, the universe is tough. There's not much joy to go around. So grab all the fun you can get. You deserve it. The normal way of articulating this is something along the lines of what this writer said. We've had a horrible term of exams and stress, so don't we deserve a bit of fun? Or I came across one brilliant article that made the same move, but by looking into the future. I think this is absolute genius. He says, spending a few days on a tourist beach is certainly relaxing, but the memories of that fleeting night, spent in the company of dozens of friends and in ancient halls, will be what you think of in 5 years when you're pressed up against a smelly businessman's armpit on the Northern Line, commuting to a soul-corroding job in marketing. It's brutal, isn't it? But you can see what he's saying. He's saying, look ahead, and to be honest, life looks pretty bleak in the future. It's going to be hard work. So we need a night of joy like this to look back on, to hold on to. We deserve at least this one precious memory to take with us into the soul-corroding world of marketing or whatever it is. Life is stingy. You've worked hard this term. You're going to work hard in life. You deserve some fun. Work hard, play hard. But I came across a really interesting article in Varsity that made a really insightful comment on that. It said this. The trouble with the work hard, play hard axiom is that while work hard is an unambiguous instruction to which we've been dutifully adhering since circa 2000, play hard is a slightly more fiddly turn of phrase which doesn't hold up well under closer examination. We know how to play nice and to play fair, but play hard? I'd rather play lightly, whimsically, amusedly and amusingly. The mantra suggests we should approach play with the same sense of panic, haste, pressure, and all-consuming intensity with which we approach work. And I think there might be something in that about what this mindset does to our experience of May Week. Because if we basically think that life is stingy and we deserve as much fun as possible, then to squeeze all of that fun out of life, we have to squeeze pretty hard. We have to kind of rush around grabbing as much joy as we can while stocks last, because it won't be around for long. And so somehow the intensity, the competition, the pressure to do the very best that we can that we feel in our work ends up kind of creeping in to the intensity, the FOMO, the pressure to have the best night of our lives that we feel when May Week comes around. But actually there are bigger problems than that. Bigger problems than us just not enjoying ourselves as much as we might want to. There's also a way in which this kind of life is stingy, I've worked hard, I've earned it mindset affects our attitude to other people. And the most obvious ugly bits of that are the places where you see just raw entitlement in May balls. There was an article that spoke about John's May ball the other year where they decided not to have any bins, and they just told guests to just throw their litter anywhere, and they employed workers to go around picking up people's litter after them. And this guy writing the article had a friend who'd been doing that, picking up litter, and this guy, guest in his black tie, turns to him and goes, "Don't you find this work demeaning? Why didn't you just buy a ticket?" And you read that and you think, there's something not right about that. Doesn't something in you say, this isn't what joy should do to people? It's just not. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. Actually, the same sense of entitlement is there in a more subtle way in the whole, I've worked hard, I deserve this mindset. Because the thing is, in order to believe you've earned your fun, you actually have to let yourself believe that other people who aren't getting the same rewards don't deserve it like you do. Even the guy who wrote the article with that story in it is really honest about his own attitude during that ball, the way he was complicit in the same problem. He talks about the moments when the fireworks started going off, and he says, staring into the ether, as those sparkling salutations littered the sky, I noticed the little part of me just itching to say, look how special I am. I earned this celebration. I worked so much harder all year than people at other universities. I'm among the cleverest and hardest working people in the country. I got loads of good A-levels because I set my mind to it, and now I have a whole degree from Cambridge. Actually, yeah, I do deserve this. Do you recognize any of that itch in yourself? I certainly do. We want to say, yeah, we deserve a great night. We've worked so hard. But then I asked one of my friends what she thought about that idea, and she said she really wasn't comfortable with it at all because, in her own words, I couldn't say that a Cambridge student has worked qualitatively harder during their degree than, say, a care worker on minimum wage. And you can see her point, because where's their reward? Where's their ball? Even just a Cambridge student who can't afford to go to a Mabel, surely they've worked just as hard as everyone else. But there's no way around it, because if our logic is that life is stingy and we have to play hard, snatching as much joy from it as we can, it's always going to feel like, you know what, I've worked hard to get this. And if I have it and you don't, it's because I'm entitled to it. I've earned it. So the question is there any other way to think about this? Any way that doesn't end up either kind of being the fun police or having this kind of ugliness of entitlement to it? I think there is, although I can't see many people trying it. And maybe the reason that not many tab articles are trying it is that the only way out of that dilemma is if you actually don't believe that ultimate reality is basically stingy. If you don't believe that you have to snatch joy from reality because it's ultimately dark and grim and selfish. And my question is, what if that's actually just a story we're all telling ourselves and it's not true? What if it turns out that ultimate reality is actually generous? Because that would change everything. Because if ultimate reality is generous, not stingy, then joy and beauty are not sort of scant wages to be snatched at in a cruel world. They're gifts. And we can receive them and enjoy them like gifts, free to share them rather than hoard them. See, I got a glimpse of this from my mate Isabel. She was a couple of years above me. She'd been to loads of Maybells, and then in her last year, she went to Selwyn Maybell, but she went for free because she was doing an acoustic set. And she said it was the best night of her life, or at least the best Maybell she'd ever been to, because she didn't feel like she was under pressure to have the best time possible, to squeeze as much fun out of every second as she could. She didn't feel like this tab article talks about. Now, here's to spending the night continuously agonizing over how much each exact hour is costing you, whether the food queues are worth it, how many Snapchats you can bombard your home friends with, and when it is appropriate to finally put on your trainers. Instead, she said she just relaxed and spent loads of the time with some of her best friends having a brilliant chat. And they did various things together, but nowhere near as much as they could have done. And she said it was just the best night that she could remember. You see, there's a secret here. When we think we've earned the joy, we end up trying to snatch and squeeze out every last bit of it, and it's pressured, and it's frantic, and it's full of FOMO. Whereas when we know we've been given it for free, we're actually set free just to enjoy it. To just enjoy being with these people at this moment in this place, to actually feel grateful that we are alive. Getting it for free brings us a whole different kind of freedom. And that got me thinking, imagine this. Imagine a Maybell that was completely free. Imagine how gloriously different that would feel. There would be no sense of exclusivity. You would be there with all your friends, you'd feel right at home, but it wouldn't be that all the rich kids are on the inside and then the disadvantaged and the struggling are shut out. Everyone would be welcome. Imagine it, like us as students riding the Dodgems, eating our own pizza alongside the people that we walk past on the street outside Sainsbury's every day, laughing with them, dancing with them to the ABBA tribute band at 3 a.m. Like, all that jarring sense of privilege would be gone. No one could feel that they deserved it and someone else didn't. Everyone would just be united in this sense of sharing this amazing experience and knowing that they did not even slightly deserve it. It would just be a staggering, exuberant act of generosity, sheer grace. And I don't know about you, but when I imagine that, I think that really that gets so much closer to what every May Ball is kind of reaching towards. That gets you so much closer to it feeling like, yes, this is how joy should be. This is what joy should do to people. This is right, this is good. But maybe you're thinking, lovely idea, mate, but the cost of doing that would obviously be insane. Who would host a party like that? And you've got a point. It's just that weirdly, I think I might know a guy. Initially, people thought this guy was absolutely crazy because he was at parties loads of the time, but hardly ever with the cream of the social crop, the in crowd. He was turning up and starting parties with the lowest of the low, with nasty people, shameful, disgusting people who would normally never be invited to anything. And he actually issued stark challenges to the elites of his day, religious, social, political. He challenged them to follow his example and throw parties where they invited the sorts of people that would never in a million years be able to give them anything in return, the poor and the disadvantaged and the forgotten. You may have guessed by now that I'm talking about Jesus. And interestingly, he also told loads of stories about parties. And there's one particular story that I think is really profound and speaks very relevantly to this question of sort of May Balls and earning or deserving them. So to set the scene, he told this story as he was hanging out with basically all of these undesirables, these people that everyone else just refers to as sinners, right? But then a group of these much more religious, righteous people turn up at the back, and they're muttering to each other, complaining, and basically saying, who is this guy? He welcomes sinners and eats with them. Doesn't he have any standards at all? So you've got the junkies and the judgmentals. You've got the rebellious and the really, really righteous. You've got the, I'm a mess and don't I know it? And at the back, you've got the, yeah, you are a mess and don't we all know it? And Jesus sits down and just tells them all the story. And keep an eye out for the things that are given for free and the things that are earned, but mostly just enjoy the story. So Jesus says that there is a father with two sons. And one day his youngest son comes to him and asks him for his share of the inheritance now. Now this is shocking, right? He's basically walked up and said, Dad, you know that money I'm supposed to get when you die? Could we just pretend that you're dead so that I can just take the money and get out of here? But what's far more shocking is the dad's response. Because he says yes. He sells half of his land and gives the money to his son. And as much as it would have been absolute agony, he lets him go. And the son takes it, he gets as far away as he can, and he basically just goes crazy. He's kind of a first century Middle Eastern Bullingdon Club kid. He's just spending money all over the place, smashing things up. Parties, prostitutes, whatever, smashing everything, including himself. And then eventually his money runs out, and actually, to make things worse, there's a famine in the country that he's gone to. And he ends up absolutely desperate, friendless, working, feeding pigs, and so hungry he wishes he could eat the pig slop. But then it occurs to him, hang on, the servants back at home have enough food to eat. And so he decides that he's going to make the journey home and he's going to face the anger of his father, but just beg him to please let him come back and work and earn his keep. So he makes the long walk home, starving and stinking of pig and sweat. But when he gets to the edge of the village, his father sees him. This father has been waiting and watching and longing for him to come home. And when he sees him, he runs out to him. And he doesn't care that everyone in the village is pointing and laughing. He is just running to his son. And when he gets to him, he wraps him up and he kisses him. And the son tries to start offering this idea of him coming back as a servant, but the father won't even let him finish. He just shouts to the servants, come on, bring the very best robe and wrap him up in it. Bring the family ring, put it back on his finger. Bring sandals, his feet must be killing him. And then go and get the best animal we have. Go and get the fattened calf, get it ready to eat, because we're going to have a massive party. Everyone in the village is invited, because we've got to celebrate. This is my son. And he was dead, but now he's alive again. He was lost, but now he's found. And so they throw this massive party. It's a Middle Eastern May ball. There is food, there is dancing, there is laughter, there is music, and everyone is there just reveling in it. Everyone except the older brother. Because the older brother has heard what's going on from where he was out working in the field, and he has just gritted his teeth and put his head down and stayed outside. And when the father realizes he's not there, he goes out to him, just like he went out to his brother earlier in the day, and he pleads with him to come inside. But his older son snaps back at him. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back who squandered your property with prostitutes, you kill the fattened calf for him. You can imagine the father feels like his son's just spat in his face. There's tears in his eyes as he says to him, my son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So what does the older son do? Jesus doesn't say. He just leaves the story with that invitation inside to the great feast, hanging wide open. So what is Jesus doing here? You see how it speaks to everything that we've been talking about? Because there's 2 points to this story, right? Because he's speaking to 2 groups of people. Firstly, he's talking to these sinners, these shame-filled, guilt-filled people. And he says to them, look, I know you've run away from God. I know you've trashed everything, including yourselves, and you feel like you could never be part of the family again. But the story doesn't have to end in the pigsty. In spite of everything, God loves you massively, outrageously. And if you just turn around, he will come running out to you and wrap you up and welcome you home. And he's going to throw the biggest party in history, the feast to end all feasts, and you can be the guests of honor. And that says to us today, yes, you are right to love joy. You are right to long for a party that just never ends, where the laughter and the food and the feasting just keep coming. Of course you're right. Actually, that's where God is taking the universe. He invented joy. He is the one who wrote music and laughter and beauty into our beings and into the cosmos. And he is going to throw the feast to end all feasts, the wedding party of God with his people, and there will be laughter and there will be wine and it will be everything that Mayballs at their most glorious moments ever hoped to whisper about. But then there's the second group of people. There's the murmurers at the back, the elites, the righteous ones. And he paints this very striking picture of them in that older brother. He's saying, look at this guy. He thought he had to earn his father's love. He thought he had to deserve every good thing that his father could give to him. So there he is, slaving away day after day, and every day he's getting more bitter because he doesn't feel that he's getting the recognition and the reward that he deserves for all of his hard work. And now it boils over because he's fuming that his father would lavish this joy and generosity on his brother who's done nothing at all to deserve it. And you see what Jesus is saying to them? Because he says the father can only look back with tears in his eyes, shaking his head and saying, son, you got it all wrong. You never had to earn anything. Everything I have is yours. I love you. If anything you'd have asked for, I'd have given it to you. See what I did when your brother asked for everything. Of course he doesn't deserve this party. He didn't have to. It's a gift. Love is always a gift, never a payment. I never wanted you slaving. I just wanted you to be my son. So please, will you come inside? And you see now that that's profoundly relevant to us. Because you don't have to be religious to be slaving. You just have to feel like you've got to pay your own way in this world. Like you are where you are today because you've earned it That's slaving. You don't have to be at all religious to be thinking, I've worked hard. I deserve a great night. Cambridge is tough. Life is stingy. One day I'm going to be stuck in a businessman's armpit on the Northern Line. And I better grab all the fun that I can. That's slaving. But what if we've got it all wrong in our heads? What if life isn't stingy? What if ultimate reality is a God who is unbelievably generous? And he's saying you never had to earn anything. I never wanted you slaving. I wanted you to be my kid. I want you to be able to relax and be loved. Because love is never a payment, it's always a gift. Jesus is saying that is what God is really like. That's not wishful thinking, it's the truth, and that he is the living proof. And he says that he is preparing this ultimate, glorious May ball, and entry is utterly free to anyone. And like we said before, a free May ball would be insanely expensive to put on, and it's no different with this. And Jesus is all too aware of that. You can even see hints of it in the story. Think of the humiliation for that father as he runs through the village. Middle Eastern patriarchs did not run, so far below their dignity. But this guy hitches up his robes and just runs and hugs his stinking son in front of everyone. And Jesus ultimately said to people, that's what I'm doing. That's who I am. I am God running out to meet you. I am God humiliating myself by coming and letting you mock me and reject me and beat me and kill me. And I'm stretching my arms wide as I die to embrace you and welcome you home. He said he was pouring out his own blood to make the finest of wines for us, that he was tearing his own body apart to give it to us as food. Our everlasting joy together is going to cost you absolutely nothing because it cost him everything. So you're free to just enjoy it. Enjoy it. But there is one thing he shows us in the story that can disqualify us from coming to this ultimate ball. There is one thing that keeps you outside, and it's thinking you deserve to be there. Jesus is saying, it's thinking, I've worked hard, I've had my fair share of struggles and I'm a decent person, and I don't particularly see that if there is a God, he would have anything much that he'd need to forgive me for. Jesus is saying, if you're thinking like that, you are going to end up digging through bitter, gritted teeth as your father weeps and the door closes. And he's saying, please come inside. Put down your shovel and your pride and come and just enjoy the party. Come, stop trying to be a slave and come and be my kid. Come be my son. Come be my daughter. And Jesus leaves that invitation hanging wide open for the crowd who were there that day, and it's the same for us. Do we want to come inside? And I don't know, maybe there are some of us here today who are thinking, actually, I think maybe I do. And if that's you, maybe you feel like you need to understand a little bit more about what that would really mean. I'd love to chat to you afterwards. That would be a real joy. Please grab me. I'd love to talk to you. But I'd also love to hear everyone's thoughts, questions about the story, about everything I've said. So we're just going to take a minute now for you to chat with the person next to you and text in questions to the number that's on the pillars and on here. And then we'll come back up and answer your questions. Thanks.
I realised that wasn't long, but if we could draw discussions to a close there. We'll start with a question texted in, Mike. That's sort of a hopeful story, but what about those who, just aren't as privileged and, don't seem to be able to enjoy those gifts just because they don't have them?
Brilliant. So what I love about Jesus is that he turns up and he doesn't sort of turn up and say to people, like, fun is bad, joy is bad, good things are bad things. But he insists on flipping everything upside down. He insists on going to the people who at the moment have nothing. And he insists on challenging the people who have everything. And so actually what I love about it is the vision that he gives of what God is doing and is going to do, is that exactly the people who right now, a May ball is a pretty sick joke to them, if they understood what it was and what we were spending it, how much money we were spending on it and all of that. Exactly those people are the people who are going to be the guests of honor, because they have said to Jesus, I want to be at the marriage feast where I get to be united to you forever. And he has said, you know what? I love you, and I love you just as much, if not maybe a tiny bit more, than the ones who've got everything right now. I love you so much, I'm going to give you everything that you ever actually needed. And this is why Jesus turns up and says to people, blessed are the poor in spirit. And other times he just said, blessed are the poor. Because if you have nothing now, it's so much easier to realize that you can't be independent, that you can't earn your own way in the world and get yourself everything you need, that you don't deserve God's approval or his love. It's so much easier if you've got nothing now to realize that you need a God who is generous and forgiving and who will give you it for free. And so Jesus said, lucky are you if you're one of those people who can see that they need me. And watch out if you're one of the people that feel like you don't. Great, thanks. That's a brilliant question.
A question saying, what does this actually mean to us? Does it just mean we can go about life like very carefree and not working hard at all? Or is it just a change of mindset? How does this practically look out in life?
I think changes of mindset change what you actually do. And one of the problems that a lot of other kind of sources of advice and things that tell you this is the way to make your life better is that they actually start with telling you what to do and don't start with changing the way you see the world. Because if you still see the world as this kind of dark, selfish place where you're going to have to kind of carve out any kind of joy that you're going to get from it, then ultimately not just work but also play is going to be this kind of frightening, pressured, frantic thing. And work, which should be a real joy because you get to contribute to the life of the world, it becomes this thing where you're kind of under pressure, trying to make a name for yourself, trying to get yourself some success and some security so that finally you can rest easy. But you can never rest easy because the universe is dark and scary and it could take away everything you have at any minute. I realize that this isn't how we normally kind of think on a day-to-day level, but the reality is that's what's in the back of our heads. If we believe there's no God, everything's an accident, my life is meaningless. The beautiful thing about what Jesus tells us is that actually reality means that it makes sense to not worry and not be stressed and not feel like everything's on us. The reality is that God is the ultimate one and he is good and generous. And he loves to care for us if we'll ask him to. And that sets us free to enjoy work. Because I don't have to kind of snatch security and a name for myself. I'm loved, I'm valued exactly as I am. And my God is my dad and he can look after me. And so I'm free to just go and do the good thing I was made for, which is contributing to the life of the world. Doing good for other people as I work, in whatever area of life that might be. And with fun, it's exactly the same. We can come to it, but we don't have to think, well, hang on, I need to make sure I have the best possible time. We can actually think, hang on, who is it that I might be forgetting about this week? Who is it that is struggling at the moment amongst my mates, who might actually be having a really rough time when everyone else is off absolutely loving it? How could I have joy that I share with them? How could I have joy that overflows from me rather than it being something that I've sort of snatched from wherever I can find it? It's an attitude change, but it changes very, very practically how you live. And I didn't want to kind of prescribe a whole set of rules about, you know, what's the Christian attitude on how much is too much for a gig or a party or a Mayball, because ultimately, Jesus says, whoa, 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 it's way deeper than that. You've got to start at the heart and work outwards. Sorry, I've talked way too long. That was a good question.
And final question. It's all good and positive, but how can we know it's actually true?
Brilliant question. I realised as I finished writing this talk that it was desperately short on any kind of reason to actually think this is not just wishful thinking, which is why I had one tiny phrase where I said, Jesus is the living proof that this isn't wishful thinking. And for me, the thing that convinced me to become a Christian was just looking at the historical fact of this guy, who is, I mean, he's the most influential figure in human history. He's absolutely shaped half the world for the last 2,000 years. And yet, it seems that if he's not God himself coming into the world as a human, based on what he said about that, he must be an absolute lunatic. He must be insane, or the greatest con man in the history of the world. And as I looked at the history of that, I became convinced that there definitely were people straight after he died who were utterly convinced that he had come back from the dead, and they were willing to stake their lives on it. That is a historical fact, and I'd love to talk for another 2, 3, 4 hours about that with all of you. But it's a fact, and I was eventually convinced that if that is true, it seems like in history this guy came back from the dead. And if that's true, it means that basically I should trust him to tell me about reality. And it turns out if you trust him to tell you about reality, everything starts to make sense. And the fact that you feel like joy is good, and you were made for that, and the fact that you feel like there's something wrong about joy that steals joy from someone else, all of this starts to make sense. Because that's the universe we were made for. That's the universe he's put us in. That's what God is like, a God of joy that overflows to others. Yeah. I would, look at him. That's what I'm saying. And in fact, on your tables, there are little books called Uncover, and they are just the biography of Jesus that I took that story from. You can look, it's on page 106, the story that I was telling, so you can check if I made it all up. I didn't, but you can check. And I would love you to open that up. The very first sentences, Luke is saying, look, I'm a historian, I've talked to the eyewitnesses, this is what happened. And as you read through it, you start to see who Jesus was. And you start to see that the universe is a much more exciting place than you've ever been told it was. So I would challenge you to do that and see what you find.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. We would encourage you to take away those Uncover Lukes from your table. If you're interested and you want to investigate this story, the claims of Jesus for yourself. If you want to read about it more as well, there'll be books on the table at the back. One I'd like to mention is called A Prodigal God, and explores the implications of if this story that Jesus told is true, how can that change our life, and what does that really mean for us? Please also stick around on your tables as snacks and desserts come out. Continue those conversations. Keep on asking each other questions. Also, come back next week where Amy or Ewan will be speaking on the world's best-selling book. Is it irrelevant? How can it be irrelevant if it's the world's best-selling book? And that is the Bible. And so, stick around. There's also some feedback cards on your table. So if you have any feedback, please fill them in. Carry on chatting. Mike would love to speak to you as well if you have any questions for him. And enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoons. Thank you.